Welcome back, everyone. I would like to introduce Brenda Adelman today. How are you?
I'm well. Thank you so much for having me. It's exciting to be connected to you again.
Yes, even getting on this call just feels the connection and the void of that we've had this whole year. It feels good to connect.
Yeah. Yep, it sure does.
Yes. Well, we met when I took your class on Healing Through Story, Tell Yours on stage class. And it was a great experience for me. And I just want to know, how did you get involved in starting this class?
Oh yeah. And that class was so amazing. And what was so wonderful about it is that I connect with you and everyone on such a deep level because I'm hearing what's really real for people. I got into storytelling and teaching storytelling because I was telling my own story, actually my own story or the event that happened in my life back in 1995. I was actually hiding from it and not sharing, and I was in despair and depression and all those things until I started sharing my story. So the story is that in 1995, my father, who I adored, and I was daddy's little girl growing up, shot and killed my mother, who was my best friend, and just
Devastating.
unconditional loving from me. And then within a month, he moved in with my aunt, my mother's sister, and then married her
Oh my
before
goodness.
even going to prison. And I spent several years just in despair, thinking I was damaged goods because of what happened with my family and being so afraid. And I started writing during my sleepless nights, and this like poetry came out that was super dark and sexual and angry, and then I'd read it in the morning when I finally passed out and got up, and I'd be like, who wrote this? Like, that's not me, because I defined myself as someone who was nice. And it was me trying to integrate all these feelings instead of just being the nice person and feeling like, well, you must forgive, you must put it to the side. But I wasn't feeling that way. And so that started my healing, like my writing at night. I wrote like 100 poems in 30 days. I
Wow.
was already an actress at the time in an acting class, and I just had a hit that I needed to tell my story instead of hiding behind characters. I needed to tell my story on stage in a story exercise, terrified because I hadn't done all the inner work I've done since then, and thinking I'll get so judged. There were 100 people in class, but I got up, and instead of getting judgment, I got a standing ovation from the 100 people in this top class. I had people coming over to me telling me that something in what I shared, in a very entertaining way, but really raw, opened something in them, and they forgave themselves, or they forgave people in their lives. And then a director wanted to work with me, a producer wanted to work with me. So I wrote out this short piece into a full-length show in LA, put it up. People would laugh, people would cry, but I would go home and be so miserable because I hadn't done the inner work. And so I took a couple of years off, got my master's in spiritual psychology, healed myself to the very core, took my dad to court for wrongful death after he got out of his 2.5 years in prison.
What
But
happened?
from a place of, yeah, that's it.
Wow.
From a place of self honor versus punishment, and rewrote the ending of my show because I found a way to forgive him and not let my anger toward him burden me. And so since then, I have been performing my show regularly, teaching on the power of forgiveness, the process that I had. And then about the end of 2014, I started teaching my process to other actors and then entrepreneurs who wanted to heal from their story and then share it in a way where they could use all of themselves because they weren't hiding at the same time. So that's how I got into it.
Yes, healing and forgiveness is the hardest part. And all that guilt and shame just from,
Right.
yeah, feeling the judgment of others of what are they going to think and overthinking that. And oh, yes, I definitely know.
Yeah. And it was in sharing, but for me, it's like I've performed and presented all over the world for so many different communities, and the audiences are so moved, and they're so like they get it. And that's what I wanted for my clients. So what happened with Tell Your Story, Healing Through Story, that class, is that what I realized is I've coached clients on telling their stories on stage, but I never had the experience of putting a showcase up and seeing the audience, you know. And so healing through story, when I got to do that pre-COVID and do the showcase and actually coach you guys in 6 weeks to have a short story that was so impactful that you didn't feel bad sharing it, that you actually felt empowered. And then the audience like was so gratifying for me, because I can share about forgiveness, but you have your own message. Everybody else has their own message. So now since COVID, and even before, I started to do it on virtually, but I also include a showcase so that we're inviting people, because I find without the showcase, like I know for me, my acting, my presenting, my power all got so much stronger because I had a deadline and I had to do it right in front of people, versus people could be writing their stories forever and they never get to the next level. So that's how that's evolved.
Yes, that was important to me too. And that was one of my biggest fears of, oh yeah, I could write the story and tell it different ways, but to really present it in front of people, oh my gosh, that's a game changer.
Yeah. Well, you have to finally say, okay, it's done where it is. You have to say it's done. And then the courage it takes for people to go that next level, it forces people to go from kind of amateur to pro, because you have to give everything to get past that fear. And what I want to say is, and I was telling you before we started, your healing in the class and your story and what you owned, oh, watching that journey was so incredible. Like watching you be empowered and then watching the audience. And like, I remember you telling me that you shared your piece with one of your mom's friends before you even went up. Like, I remember this stuff because it touched my heart so much, and how healing it was. Like, you made such a difference on my life, the teacher, and then all those people, and like going forward. That's what it's about, not hiding, you know?
Yes, thank you so much. It feels good to be open to talk about it and to be there for others to open up and tell their stories, and
Yep.
helping others not be afraid of just being themselves. Yeah, it's so
Yeah,
important.
and then loving yourself through any fears that you have. Like, if you have fears, be like, okay, it's there. I'm also not about like just throw your stuff out there. I'm kind of like, I have this pet peeve these days because I'm an entrepreneur also, in addition to a storyteller. And there's a lot of coaches that are like, tell your vulnerable story, tell your vulnerable story. And it's like, as someone who has done so much spiritual psychology and coaching, I'm like, that story was hidden for a reason. So, yes, I believe we should tell it, but we want to coax it out in a gentle way. And we want to put the support in place so that while we're sharing something that has been so sensitive, we feel like we're caring for ourselves at the same time. Because here's the thing, I didn't get judgment that time. I got the standing ovation, but there are people that judge me. There are people that judge everybody. So we have to know, yeah, people will judge, especially with online stuff, but know ourselves and know our stories so well that it doesn't matter. We get that that's other people's judgment. That's not us. We're doing what we can to make the world a better place and to express ourselves more. And it's not about people who judge. In my experience, people who judge are judging themselves. It's just like they haven't healed. So that's why they're judging, you know?
Yes, that self-judgment is hard to get out of your own head to get yourself out there. Yeah,
Yeah.
it is so important. And I thank you so much for that whole experience, to just tell my mom's story, and for people to know that medication is not the cure-all for depression was a big
Oh
thing.
my God. I mean, you should share just a little bit about what your story is, because it's so moving to me. And I was saying before we came on, it's like our moms are both here with us.
Yeah, the moms, that unconditional love that will never go away, even on their spiritual journey now, passed over. But yeah, just knowing that she had that self-judgment and didn't have that self-care routine, and to know that I need it now, and to not ever be in that state of mind of her being on antidepressants and having the side effects of suicide is a side effect of antidepressants. And that's part of my mission, to tell people it's okay to be sad, but you need to move forward and try natural healing ways. Connect to nature, go
Yeah.
for a walk. There's other things you can do. If you truly think that you need that medication, you still need to have connection with people and don't think it's the cure all. Yeah, you have to
Yeah.
have self-awareness is crucial for true self-happiness.
Yeah, it's so
Yeah.
important. So your message is so important. So that was one of the things too, and like working in the class, it was like, well, what's your message? Like really get clear what your message is so that when you don't want to share, you're still sharing because you know you're helping someone, right? Because this is scary stuff, saying, revealing these things, but it's courageous. It's the hero's journey. It's like because someone in the audience is going to hear you or I or someone else and be like, that's me. Oh, I'm not alone. I think the worst time for me certainly was when I felt like I was so alone, like nobody can understand what I went through. And I actually, because most people have gone through what I've gone through, like probably what you've experienced too, don't talk about it. That's why we're like on this mission to talk about it. So it was like Shakespeare's character of Hamlet. I knew because my mother taught me Shakespeare, that Shakespeare's character of Hamlet, his father was killed by his uncle and his uncle married his mother. And knowing that, when I felt so alone, was like somewhere in history, someone lived through something like I did, and it made me feel better. And so now in my storytelling, because I'm an actress too, it's a very New York story. And then I have soliloquies from Hamlet for when the emotions are too much, because no one would want to hear me sing. Other people would sing at that time.
Yes. So how did you cope in that moment when you found out that?
Ugh, I have the scene in my show. I've looked at it in every which way. I was lucky in that I was engaged at the time, and so my fiance is the one who gave me the news. I was out for a really amazing day workshop, and when I came in, he told me. Um, I think when something happens like that, you just go into shock and a bit of numbness, because I was in California. I moved back. I mean, I flew back the next morning to New York, and there were so many unanswered questions, right? My father wasn't in prison yet because he had a lawyer with him, and the lawyer was telling him not to talk to anyone. The gun, the murder weapon that he used, which was his gun, a gun I learned to shoot on, disappeared. There were 8 hours before the police were called. So I was just like in a tailspin of what's happening. And I was also,
Uh,
I loved my mother so much, but I also loved my father so much. So it was like impossible for me to lose my whole family in that night. So I went into a bit of denial. And
yes, definitely.
for a picture. And yeah. And so it was denial. And actually the big healing came for me when I could no longer be in denial. Because while I was in denial of like my father kept saying, he didn't know what happened, the gun went off, he didn't know who pulled the trigger, like all these things that didn't make sense because she was shot point blank range in the head. But while I was trying to believe that, for me, I was not listening to my inner guidance. I was not eating, then I was overeating. Then when I was overeating, I was like gaining weight, and I would be upset, like mean to myself about that. So I didn't have to think about the real thing, which was my father killed my mother.
Mm,
And it was only in recognizing that he could never give me the answers I needed, and that I needed to look at the evidence and I needed to accept that he did this. It was in that I started getting my power back. And I talk a lot and I teach on forgiveness. I teach on boundary setting because for me, the first boundary was not, I wouldn't call it a healthy boundary, but it's a first boundary. I cut him out of my life. And the reason it's not healthy, even though it's a first step sometimes, is because that anger turns in on us, right? I'm shutting my heart to him, but I was shutting it to everybody. And so I was really grateful. I found my master's program to learn how to measure how much my interactions with him or even my thoughts about him were hurting me. And then I could do, practice meditation, getting conscious on what's happening versus just stuffing it so that I could heal. And
yeah.
I did a forgiveness process around him. I went to a primal scream workshop. That was really helpful. And I also did a 2-year master's degree in spiritual psychology where I worked my stuff around him really consciously, kind of channeling, working with not his personality, but his soul, And then I did all these forgiveness tools that I teach now that I learned in that program. And so it was a process. It was definitely a process. And then I decided to take him to court for wrongful death when he got out of prison. And that was probably besides writing my story and sharing it, was the most important, most courageous decision I made in my life, because I had to stop the pattern between us. And when I took him to court with my brother, when we took him to court, he skipped town and I never saw him again.
Wow, I didn't know that. So you still never saw him again?
No, and he died in 2000. Before he died, I did a forgiveness ceremony, which is what I have in my critically acclaimed one-woman show that I've performed all over the world. I was guided to write a poem, and the poem was about our oneness, and that if I hated any part of my father, I hated a part of myself, and I was no longer willing to do that. And I took his hat and I went to the top of a mountain in LA, and I felt angels by my side. I recited the poem and I threw the hat over the mountainside. And it was like when it was out of my sight, there was a heaviness lifted off of me. And I was no longer my father's protector. I was Brenda. I was just me. And I did it from a sense of love. And so then when he didn't show up at court, I can't remember the exact dates of then when he died, I did that ceremony of release because I realized I was never having my father back. I was never getting the man I wanted back. And then when he died a few years later, I grieved, but I wasn't like in guilt, or a lot of people are in guilt, even if they have abusive parents, because they haven't resolved anything. I was really at peace.
Yeah, you're already over it. You hadn't seen him in years. That was part of
Well,
your
I wasn't, no, but you cannot see them for years. I wouldn't have been over it if I hadn't really done a ton of forgiveness and doing that ceremony release. But when he died, it was like my inner child, even with all that inner work, my inner child still was like, oh, he's really gone. But it was more like I'm at peace now versus ever thinking he's coming back and taking responsibility and stuff like that.
Wow. Yeah. That's great that you did that and were able to recognize it and help yourself through that.
Yeah, I'm very grateful. And that's why I teach this forgiveness and this healing work too, because it was hard work and it comes from all those different modalities that I studied. But I know what it feels like to forgive a little. I know what it forgives to at the core of your being. And then of course I had to forgive my aunt, my mother's sister who married, like it's been a long journey, but it's why I'm so passionate about teaching the healing part of telling our stories, like changing it so that it doesn't hurt us in even a little bit, and then sharing it. And the reason why telling my story on stage helped so much, and why I'm so like, I teach people not just to write their story, but to jump into the characters of their story, really get into the mind of the characters, is because as an actor, you cannot play a character. You can't, as a good actor, you can't play a character as a villain. And so for me to do my one-woman show where I jump into like 12 different characters, I jump into my father's character, but I can't play him one note as this murderer. I have to play him as a full-rounded man who had expectations and thwarted expectations and didn't have skills and mental illness. Like all of that gave me more compassion for him, which ends up helping me,
Definitely full circle. Wow, that's great. Tell me about your mom.
She was so beautiful. So that's a picture of her back there. I was going to show you this picture too. That was painted of her in the 1970s. And she was my best friend. She was quirky. She was beautiful. She was an artist. I have really funny parts in my show about her because she decided to really focus on nudes and also S&M for her thesis in college. And, I was like, when you have a mom that's out there so much, I was like, even though I never looked shy, I was more reserved. And she has a book that was an original, it was this S&M couple, and the man used to be a woman. And this was like the 80s sometime, or the late 80s, and she had it got accepted into the New York Public Library on 42nd Street. And she, then she would also invite me to like these photo shows that she got in, and it would be like a rated X show. And I'd be like, what friends am I going to invite? Because I want to support my mom, you know, but it would be like all these naked people. And
How
so
old
she
were
was
you?
wild, but
How old were you at that
what?
time? How old were you?
Oh, well, we went to college at the same time. So I was like
Oh,
20 and she was, you know, in her 40s.
oh my
And
God.
she was wild. She was an artist and a photographer, and she saw the world differently, but we were best friends. She took me traveling with her all over the world. Um, so she was really dynamic and unique. Didn't really fit into Brooklyn. We grew up in Brooklyn. So I start the show dressed as her in that painting and with the blonde wig, and I come to life as her. And then I was just going to show you this. It's like show and tell. That's my picture from my Brooklyn Hamlet. That's
Oh,
my promo stuff for my
beautiful.
show. But yeah, so I play her too, and she was so loving with me, and she was fierce, and they had this, you know, love-hate relationship. And yeah.
What's your favorite memory of her that makes you smile?
There are so many.
I know. Every time I ask that to someone,
Something
there's so many.
something simple though, like her skin was so soft. And I would just, when I was younger, it was like when I was living there, it was like I just remember her cuddling me, and her skin would be so soft, or being sitting next to her and just like touching her arms. They were so soft. I just loved them. And her green eyes, like just the way she looked at me, you know. And we had really wonderful, wonderful travels and some really fun stuff. Like we got caught in a typhoon in Hong Kong
Oh
because
my
she was the
gosh.
like wild one. And we were at the airport, and they had a typhoon, and they canceled. We were actually on the tarmac, and they canceled the flight. And we found a hotel room, but she wanted to go shopping in the typhoon. You know, we were there for an extra night, like shopping in a typhoon for like, you know, gifts and stuff. Like it was just wild. She was just wild.
Oh, that's cool. That's a good story. Oh my
What do
gosh.
you think? What do you think about with your mom?
Yeah, she was funny. There were so many great memories. I even asked my dad at a low moment that I had one time, said, Dad, I really need a good story right now. Tell me something, a good memory. And he said they were all good except for the last one. And I was just like, oh, this is devastating the way that he said it. But she was funny. There were so many jokes, and I think that was the hardest part of she hit it so well that was still joking and having fun.
I know. I mean, I remember when you told me that, you were like, there was no, like, you didn't know it was gonna. That's what's really hard. I mean, I would say that's probably one of the things we have in common is that sudden, like, they're just gone, and you didn't expect it. It's such a shock to the system.
Oh, definitely.
Although what I will say is my mother definitely had more, like, her and my father were having quite a hard year that year. Yeah.
Do you remember the last time you saw her?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh,
I was so codependent with both of my parents. I had moved out to LA 9 months before because I fell in love from New York. But in New York, I was like always in their stuff, trying to be the, you know, wife to my father, the husband to my mother, in totally like triangulating way. But I loved them both so much. And I saw them on 6 different occasions during those 9 months. Me going back to New York, them coming out to LA. We went to Spain together to see my nephew. And they had come out just 10 days before. They were in LA. And they, you know, I think they were probably fighting because they always did. But it was almost like normal, you know? And
where they were.
oh, they were fighting. No, they were fighting. They were fighting pretty bad. I remember what happened now. They were fighting, and I ended up getting food poisoning. And because I got food poisoning, I'm sure there's body, mind connections of everything. But because I got food poisoning and I was so weak and I was a mess, my neck was frozen to the right. I couldn't keep food down, but because of it, it stopped the fighting. And my mom was cuddling me and all this stuff. And I do have this piece in the show that, like, as soon as they left in the airport, I was like, oh, I feel great. My stomach doesn't hurt anymore. My neck is fine. Um,
Aw, it's like that inner child
but I
moment.
did,
Yeah, the inner child of you had to
yeah,
be sick so they would come
protection.
together to take care of you. Aw.
But then I did talk to my mom. Like, I talked to both of them on a Wednesday, and my mother was dead by Saturday. And it was not a good conversation. They were fighting. I think she called me at like 6 in the morning. She, forgot that I was in California and she was in New York. And it started out as a pretty good conversation. And she was saying how her and my dad were going to separate, but that it was okay. They were going to live together and they were going to see other people, but it would be fine. And it was so calm that I thought, okay, that could work. They're obviously obsessed with each other. And then she went into some just horrible anxiety and upset about a woman he had cheated on her with. And she was going into details. Like, it was really inappropriate with me. And then he jumped on the phone. This is not in my show, but he jumped in on the phone and was like, everything's fine, everything's good, which was his personality. But obviously it's so hard on someone who's not seeing things like that. And then that person comes in and is like, everything's fine, I don't know what she's talking about. And 3 days later, she was dead, gunshot wound to the head.
Oh my goodness. Oh, what is the biggest lesson you've learned in your life?
I think the biggest lesson I've learned is to love myself again and trust myself again. Because back then it was like, after losing my mom like that and so suddenly, and losing my family for all intents and purposes, I feel like I made almost like I made a pact with myself that I will never get that close again, because I don't ever want to hurt like that again. I ended up breaking up with my fiance about a year or so after that. I feel like it was because, on the surface, there were some things, but I feel like it was because I felt so unlovable, and like I didn't want anyone to see me going through my pain, even though he was a really good guy. And I feel like when I went to the master's program in spiritual psychology, that was like 5 years later, I really concentrated on self-love, self-healing, letting go of my shame, letting go of guilt. And then I ended up creating, a relationship. I was married for 13 years. We adopted a son. We got divorced in 2015, but I'm in a loving relationship right now. So it was just like, I'd say the biggest, like, I teach forgiveness. And I would say that, maybe it's the ability to forgive is something that I have learned at a deep level and I teach. But I actually think for me personally at this point, because I've been teaching that for so long, it's about that self-love, that everything is an inside job. Self-forgiveness, the people we attract into our life or how we respond to them, everything is an inside job. And I do think that self-love helps everything, because if we love ourselves, we make different choices. I love myself, and then I took my father out of my life. I love myself. I will be with someone who treats me with respect,
Yes.
and fun. I love having fun too.
Love and fun. Yeah, we gotta laugh. That's why I say live, laugh, love, because my mom always said that. Always remember, live, laugh, love. And I always said I would never get a tattoo, but then I got on instead of my wrist, live, laugh, love, because that was part of my connection to her, to always have that.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
Yeah, so that's how I created all this. Oh, well, do you have a healthy daily practice that you can share with us?
A daily practice?
Your daily practice.
I do a lot of listening to spiritual teachers. I also bike ride, like especially when COVID came, to have mental health. I jump on my bike. I also like to exercise. Like, I go to Cowles Mountain when I can, because it's super steep, and so I feel like I can ask questions on the way up, and then I'm so exhausted by the way down, I get some. So for me, it's a lot about having spaciousness and up-leveling my vibration. So that's why spiritual teachers are so important to me. The person I'm listening to a lot right now is Kyle Cease. I just love what he is teaching and speaking about. And he is someone who was a successful stand-up comedian that moved into spiritual teaching. And he's so real and so raw. He's not like, I'm perfect, but he's really he's really got a high vibration. So that's what I do.
Good. Yeah, having that exercise routine and stay fit is definitely crucial for a healthy mind, body, and soul.
Yes. Yes, moving is really important.
Oh, so any last words that you would like to leave us with?
No, I have a gift for your audience that you'll post. It's called Tell Your Story, Heal Your Life, Create More Wealth. And of course, the wealth is, there's abundance with telling your story. I've certainly been making a living telling my story for many years. Um, but it's abundance because I'm also helping people. Like you're reaching people out there when you're willing. And it's not just telling your story on stages. Like I met someone getting my nails done a couple of years ago, and her nail was broken. And she kept saying, yeah, I have to come in every week because my nails are always broken. I'm like, well, why? And she's like, oh, because my, son's father is always trying to hit me. And because I've done my work, I was able to say, well, why is that? And it turns out she had been incarcerated, so she couldn't hit him back. But I was able to tell her, like, she just thought she had no way out. And I was able to, and she was staying for her son. And I was like, how's your son with you? Right? He was like 6. And she's like, actually, he's getting quite aggressive. I'm like, so I just want you to think about this. If he's watching this, I want you to think about, like, where could you get help? And then I told her my story about my father killing my mother, because I wanted to let her know it doesn't get better. It can get worse. But I'm saying, like, once you know your story, you don't know the ripple effect you'll have, because you're not judging others, you're not judging yourself, and you can offer what you've learned. And so that's 3 videos, and it's the different ways you can tell your story, the different modalities, the ways that you can heal yourself, and then share. And that's forgivenessandfreedom.com/free training.
Great. Yeah, she needed you that day. She needed to hear that, your words of wisdom.
Yeah, that was a moment of, like, I knew that I went into that place at that moment so that I could tell her this, right? We want to tell our stories because nobody knows what anyone else has gone through, but then that other person doesn't feel so alone. But we also want to, I feel, heal the parts inside of us that have shame or guilt or feel like we need to hide. And I'm not saying you have to say everything. I never teach that, but I'm saying, how much better will you feel if you heal this stuff, and then choose what you want to share with other people, and then you're choosing to share it from a place of peace and power versus I have to share or I'm not gonna touch it.
Exactly. Yeah, it has to be comfortable, right place, right time, and right person, an audience. Definitely.
Right. Oh yeah, and of course I'm continue to teach healing through story. Tell yours. I'm just doing it virtually now.
Yeah, that's great. Now you can do it all on Zoom, and you still have an audience and everything to do it there.
Yes, it's a definitely a learning line, get everything, figured out. But yeah, no, I've done like 5, 6, 7 showcases online, because I started doing it even before COVID. Yeah, it's amazing.
Good. I want to tell you, I put abundance in the diffuser today. So when you said abundance, I was like, well, I'm smelling abundance right now.
Nice. I think I have
Abundance
an
oil.
essential oil on forgiveness somewhere too.
Oh yes, I love forgiveness.
I
And
wonder if you gave it to me. I can't
you know
remember. Yeah.
about the feelings kit of oils?
I don't know. I have that one. I don't know where it is
It
now.
has
Yeah.
harmony, inner child, present time, forgiveness,
Amazing.
oils. Yeah, it's a good
Amazing.
little kit of oils. I do affirmations with it and everything. It's a good healing modality for me. Well, it was
Beautiful.
so great talking to you today. I enjoyed it.
Yeah. Great connecting. Thank you. I was so happy when you invited me on. Thanks so much.
Yes.
Just remember, just from you being in my class, you made such a difference.
Oh, thank you so much for living, laughing, and loving with me today.
Thank you.